Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. This is your host, Dan Turchin, advisor at Insight Finder, the system of intelligence for IT operations, and CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. Thanks again to all of you, our listeners, for making this one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. If you enjoy what we do, please like, comment, and share in your favorite podcast app. And we'll keep bringing you amazing guests like the one we have today, ad-free. In a bizarre sort of twist, the future of work is really competing with what I'll call the past of work. We're in the middle of what the Texas A&M psychologist Anthony Klotz calls the Great Resignation. There are record numbers of employees leaving their jobs in search of more fulfilling careers. As a species, when we're confronted with existential threats, like say, a pandemic, we reconsider what matters and how we want to spend our time. That's fueling interest in everything from travel to new hobbies to, of course, reskilling and upskilling. On this podcast, we've heard recently from some amazing experts like Panos Siozos, the CEO of LearnWorlds, Gary Bowles, who just published The Next Rules of Work, and Brian Tolaby, the CEO of Ahura AI, about how online learning and really new definitions of work are reshaping the traditional conversation about what it means to be employed. Well, today we get to learn what is arguably the hottest sector of the new employment landscape, data science and analytics, and what's driving all of the demand for these new kinds of careers. Just imagine a better way to train, recruit, and retain key hires for these in-demand, data-driven roles. Well, Matt Cowell, today's guest, started QuantHub to turn that vision into a successful company. Matt launched QuantHub in April of 2018, which was quite prescient, given that the pandemic was still 2 years away. And prior to that, he was an engineering leader at places like Daxco and Ministry Brands. Matt hails from the great state of Alabama, making him our first guest from the heart of Dixie. So but buckle up, this one's going to be fun. Let's learn what's on the bleeding edge of ways to develop data-fluent teams. Without further ado, Matt, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Let's get started by having you share a little bit more about your background and how you got into this space.
Yeah. Well, first, Dan, thanks for having me. This is certainly a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today. You kind of talked about my background a little bit. Originally, actually from the Midwestern part of the U.S., but I love the warmth. Maybe not the humidity as much. So made my way to Alabama, and QuantHub I'm CEO of QuantHub, and we really exist. We're a data skill platform, so we exist to really improve the overall data fluency of individuals and organizations all over the globe. And so that's our mission. And, we're early stage, just about 3.5 years in, but, we're well on our way.
So Matt, you're a chemist by training and have spent time in the trenches as an engineering leader. What has surprised you most about your entrepreneurial journey so far?
Yeah, what's been interesting, I've worked for larger companies actually as a chemist. I was a chemist at Procter & Gamble out of school, and then decided that really wasn't for me. And so went back to school and ended up going into IT with Accenture, Anderson Consulting at the time. And so I think what I've seen, and now really getting into the very early stage company, of course, is that it is quite a roller coaster. And so everything just matters more is frankly the truth of it. And so what ends up happening is at companies a little bit later stage than a startup, you're on a roller coaster too. It might be weekly. And then what's really surprised me about being something that is being in a true startup is the roller coaster can be hourly. And it's just that way yesterday. Started out the day with a 80K ARR deal. And that was at 8 a.m. And then, at 10 a.m. had a customer call that was like, so. So it's just kind of the nature of it.
There are highs and there are lows, and you got to have an iron stomach. So
That's right.
congrats on
Yeah.
the 80K ARR deal. That's amazing.
Yeah. Thanks. It was a good start to the day for sure.
You bet. You got to savor those ones, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, we get so comfortable throwing around these awful cliches about the data economy and data being the new oil. And, we're
Right.
almost
Yeah.
desensitized to that kind of stuff. And yet, there is an increasing, really an insatiable demand for kind of data fluent team members. What's
Mhm.
your perspective on what's driving that demand?
Well, I mean, it started by there's just an unbelievable proliferation of data. And so you can't get away from it. And and so that's really how this all started. And it's in every aspect of certainly of our professional lives, but even our personal lives. If I were to say something about Siri right now, or I'll say Alexa quietly so she doesn't chime in, but it's just all around us, and so that's part of it. As a society and as a species, you earlier were talking about us as a species. We start seeing those types of trends, and then we start taking advantage of that, and so with that data being all around us, now we're starting to use it much more at work, and so as a result, it's around every single one of us, and we all interact with data. We all actually typically create data, which is not something that people think about. And I mean like frontline people in customer support. They're entering tickets into CRM systems. So they're actually creating data. And so, we need better skills, frankly. There's a massive skill shortage from a data perspective globally. And so with it being all around us and it being much more a part of work now, naturally we need the skills to do that effectively.
In the popular press, we hear all the time about job elimination due to automation. We don't hear much about all the new types of careers and roles that are being created by AI and data and automation. Maybe what's your perspective on some of the new opportunities that are being created?
Well, I think you hear of people being knowledge workers, right? And so going from maybe manufacturing or repetitive processes, that's obviously what's going to be automated. And you sort of start moving up that hierarchy to being more of a knowledge worker. And so I think rather than specific positions, I actually think that's just a trend that will continue, where each and every one of us is becoming more of a knowledge worker. So we may not actually be doing the repetitive tasks as much, but then we're going to be spending time analyzing the outputs of those tasks and things that uniquely as human beings, we have a skill set that is hard to reproduce. And that's the analysis side of it to a degree. And so that's sort of the macro trend, and there will be, there are plenty of resources out there in terms of the jobs that are being created. But to me, they all kind of fit in that category of what we as human beings are very good at doing and what computers are good at doing.
So in the past few years, we've seen this proliferation of degrees in data science. Never existed before.
Right.
But many would say a 4-year degree in data science isn't required to have, a respectable job in as a knowledge worker, where your job it inherently involves data manipulation, but it doesn't necessarily mean you'd be a data scientist. What are your thoughts on the core skills required to participate in this knowledge economy?
Yeah, actually, I couldn't agree more. This is not, I think that's part of the problem, quite honestly, is there's a lot of intimidation around data, and people are afraid of data, and they're afraid of it because so often we talk about it as if you have to be a data scientist to be able to do anything with data, which is ridiculous. Being able to use data is just simply, I like to really distill it down and say, ask more questions about why things are happening, and then try to find data to answer those questions. And if that's just a super simple thing that any person can do. And so you start looking for data, like examples are in HR and hiring, or maybe you're a sales team member and you're trying to figure out where the best leads are coming from and why. So ask a couple questions and then start looking at that data. You're already becoming more data driven. And so in terms of the skills that are required to do that, these are low-level skills. These aren't data science skills. I mean, it's not that there's not a place for data scientists, but every single person in the world could could get value from being more data driven and asking more questions and answering those questions with data. And so those skills are understanding use cases for data, understanding different types of data, whether it's a behavioral data or demographic data. I mean, these are just kind of terms that are good for people to understand. And so we kind of in the field that we're in, people talk about those terms and those kind of skills as being in data literacy. And so we need a more data literate world. And so it really all starts there. And we have a learning platform, and it's by persona. And so for us, our base layer is data citizens, and those are your core data literacy skills. And then if you start layering on other skills, data storytelling, obviously visualization is what, anytime people think of data skills, they think of charts. And it's just kind of the nature of what we all think of. And so those data visualization skills, what types of charts, interpreting charts, choosing charts, but then even storytelling, getting insights out of data and then weaving a narrative around those insights. It may be a persuasive narrative. You might actually be trying to sell someone on something. And so those are all skills that are in and around data. And those are way before you start doing predictive analytics, right?
A few weeks back, we had a great discussion with a gentleman named Derek Steer, who's the CEO of Mode, which is a data analytics platform designed to make it easy to go from question to answer via data in a minimal amount of time. So right. he really talked about like what you said. It's really about asking better questions. It's not about mastering a Jupyter notebook or owning a data pipeline or something like that. So I love that persona that you mentioned, the data storyteller. So I've got kind of what Mode does and data platforms do like that. Seems to be on one side of the spectrum, and then to get to the point where you've so abstracted the analytics to the point where you're just telling stories with the data seems like a big kind of conceptual leap. How do you train someone to be a data storyteller?
Well, I think people, number one, they don't actually have to be involved in every aspect of creating the story. And what I mean by that is you may have people that are digging in very deep with the data to produce the insights. And those might be data professionals, right? Those might be your data analysts that are saying, so here's what's going on. I looked at the data, I did some deep analysis, I did some statistical analysis on this, and I'm seeing that here are the trends that are evident in that data, and maybe some of the correlations of those trends are being driven by these three things. And so maybe then now my job is to present that to management along with a proposal for what we want to do about it. Maybe we're going to staff up a project to take advantage of that. And so the most effective way to do a presentation like that is to actually include elements of storytelling. And so tell that in a way that it is actually a nice flowing story, kind of follows a narrative arc. And those are skills. Those are skills that can be taught. Understanding the different elements of a story, understanding the different elements of persuasion. How do you persuade someone to a particular opinion that you hold and that you want to convince them of? Understanding different types of visualizations and how you actually really clearly get across and show those insights visually, because most of us process things visually much faster than we do if we're in text, and so all of those things together, those are all skills. Those are all skills that need to be practiced and honed in each and every one of us to be a better storyteller, to be better at choosing visualizations, interpreting visualizations, representing insights in visuals, and so on. And so that is a skill set. I mean, there are books on that. There's plenty of training on that. Obviously, in our platform, we have a lot of elements of that in our learning platform as well. And so those are hard skills that people can definitely learn.
So make it real for us. So take an example of a customer you're proud of and tell us, how they measure success using your platform.
Yeah, one of our customers is Southern Company. It's a big utility, Fortune 150 utility conglomerate in the Southeast and even up the Eastern Shore a little bit. And so they are one of the things that I'm very happy to see. I mean, we're a startup, right? So, these things are all very, very meaningful to us. And it's really great to see that in a pretty significant rollout at a company like Southern Company. This is not a high tech company, right? This is a utility company. And it's not that they don't have high tech people there, they do, but this is not, it's not like our first big customer was Uber and they're, incredibly technical workforce. And it's only those types of companies that are investing in data literacy. It's great to see that it's utilities and manufacturing type companies that are doing it. And on top of that, one of the data points that I really love in that customer example is 80% of the people that are involved in the platform or that have seats for our subscription are outside of IT. And so this is not a platform just for data professionals. This is a platform for all of us. And I think that means we're hitting at the right thing because that's what we're trying to do. And so I'm particularly proud of that stat and seeing that proliferate across our customer base.
We talk a lot about the ethical implications of this broader use of data and how we can make decisions that are inadvertently biased because there's bias built into the data. When you think about the training that you do you feel like you as QuantHub have an obligation to introduce your students to the potential pitfalls of making decisions and generating insights from data when the data may have poor hygiene?
It's a great question. So, in terms of thinking about it from an ethics perspective, I don't think it's our job as QuantHub to teach and preach ethics per se. Naturally, that's maybe a different type of not even training, but just maybe core values of companies and hiring people and promoting a high character, high integrity environment. But for us, we actually, part of data citizen that I mentioned earlier is bias. So we actually have learning content around the different types of bias. And so that's critically important. But I think even beyond that, understanding back to understanding charts, understanding different types of data, understanding different elements of data quality. These things are all important in recognizing bias. And it's so that you basically what you want is you want people to not take data at face value, right? They should ask some questions. And where'd that data come from? How was it collected? And being able to understand different types of data back to the psychographic versus behavioral versus demographic and so on. These types of things are useful concepts to understand for people to, on their own, be able to recognize potential pitfalls with data, which, some of those problems come from, yes, there's bias in a data set. There's then going to be some biased analysis. And if I'm not thinking about it, if I don't understand even how that's possible, and I don't understand the different types of bias, well, it's not really an ethics problem. It's just a lack of understanding, right? So it's actually going to proliferate just simply because I don't know any better, right? And so that's where I think data literacy, as an example, is a really important skill in this, in specifically in representing things accurately with data.
I firmly believe no data analyst in a business setting derives some insights from data and has any kind of ulterior motive or insidious motive about how to manipulate the data to make a decision that's that's biased. And yet there are many examples from who goes to prison to how long they're in prison for, who gets a loan, who gets a raise, who gets the job, where let's say underrepresented populations are underrepresented in the data, and we make decisions based on the data. It creeps into the decision making.
Absolutely.
What are the ways that as a community educating the next generation of data fluent team members, how can we assert the importance of asking the question up front, what could go wrong? Like where in the process of learning does that should we be including that?
Well, that's a good question. Right now, I think we're a little late to the game in trying to upskill the entire working population of the world in data skills. It would have been great if this happened earlier in life. So I do think data literacy, if you will be sort of the gen ed of the future. And there are examples of universities. I forget if it's Duke or North Carolina. I want to say it's North Carolina, where there are aspects of data literacy creeping into the curriculum at sort of a gen ed type of level across all students, not specific to people that are going into STEM related fields. And so there also are quite a few. There's a lot of talk right now and some action happening where some of these concepts around data are actually making it into K through 12, which is where it needs to be. And so it just needs to be secondhand. And if you think about back to other sort of transformational times from a skill or technology perspective, there are plenty of examples, but one that I think of, I'm almost 50, and so I was working in the 90s when computers came out, and it was just no longer. It got to the point where it was no longer optional for you to know how to use a computer. You couldn't work and you could barely live without knowing how to use a computer, and that's actually where this is headed. And we're not quite there yet, but that is where this is headed. It's proliferating to that extent where we're just surrounded by it, and it's just part of living. It's just part of working, and that's kind of where this is headed. And so it needs to be part of the fabric of our educational system, so that we can all then take part.
I love that vision. Completely agree that part of the general education requirements should be what you're calling, a kind of a foundation in data literacy. So with respect to QuantHub and the QuantHub business model, what does the world look like when data literacy is built into the fabric of the educational system?
Well, specifically, I that's going to take a little while, and I like to think that we're going to be a part of that, and so the model that part of the problem that you have right now is that there's so many great training companies out there. I mean, these are the Coursera's of the world. These are people love Coursera. There's a great company. But when it comes to a transformational skill like this, that is sort of a every human being on the planet kind of skill, you can't just roll out training courses. Let's just take an example company, 9,000 person company, maybe. You can't send 9,000 licenses to a training, to a course and have any success, particularly when it's somewhat of a technical skill and you're sending it to non-technical people. It's just not going to happen like that. You just get so low adoption that you don't really move the needle. And so, a different model is needed. And so we're a micro learning platform. We're like the language learning platforms. You've heard of Duolingo and Babbel and some of these others. They're all learned 10, 15 minutes a day. And they're based on learning science, so that they understand that you got to put things back in front of people after they learn them so that they remember them. And that's our model. And it's much more easy to consume that when you start talking about those 9,000 people. It's not that they need to go search a big platform like Coursera and say data skills. I need to learn data skills. You're going to get thousands of things to come back. It needs to be something that's much, much lower friction, I like to say, so that people can actually do it. So I think long term for our business model, this is all good. These skills are necessary now and will be even more necessary in the future. And so that type of sort of transformational change that's happening globally is good for a company like us.
So you think about QuantHub as almost, like you said, a Duolingo for data literacy.
Exactly.
Now, one of the things I mentioned at the opening of the show is that you're first guest from Alabama. So one of the things I want to know is challenges and/or opportunities of starting a company in a non-traditional, in a place that's not a traditional tech hub.
Yeah. And, so these challenges, well, I think there are actually pros and cons. Some of the challenges are access to capital. Access to angel capital is great. We were able to raise our first round that we raised in 30 days, and it was 1.25 million, and it was from all angels. And so any local, we're in Birmingham, and so any city like Birmingham, whether it's in the South, North, East, West, these kind of second tier cities, there's still access to that type of capital. There are plenty of wealthy individuals that are investing in startups. I would say the institutional capital is a little harder to come by. I know you're in Silicon Valley. It's harder to get in an inbox and get those meetings and get traction in those types of organizations, those types of companies, or investment companies. I mean, VCs. That is a little bit harder, but access to talent. I mean, we're remote. We weren't remote in February of last year, but quickly in March became remote like the rest of the world. And so now we're fully remote and we love it. So we just hired someone in Madison, Wisconsin, just hired someone in Orlando, Florida. We had someone recently out of Utah. So, I don't think actually there are a lot of cons. I love living here. I love, I think we're able to, forge a very successful path. Being here in Birmingham, there's a great tech community. It's obviously smaller than it is out there or in the Northeast. But very close knit. So there are a lot of sort of trusted confidence that come from that.
I'm sold. Let me know when you're running for mayor of Birmingham, and I'll move there and vote for you.
Good Lord, I do not want to get into politics right now. So
smart man.
Don't hold your breath.
Hey, Matt, I got to get you off the hot seat, but one more question I want to get your perspective on. So let's say you're talking to a group of high school kids and they're looking at the jobs of the future and what to invest a career in, and they want to be relevant, 10 years from now or 15 or 20. What are the skills that you think are kind of future proof that high school kids should be thinking about investing in? And, what are equally important, what are some of the things that you think are careers that currently make sense, but probably won't make as much sense in 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think about this a lot because my son is a sophomore in college and my daughter is a senior in high school. And so, I think technology skills that's the obvious answer, that technology is doing nothing but becoming more important. So obviously that's what I've encouraged my kids to do, but neither one of them are doing it. And so I've thought a lot about this, that my son actually, interestingly, is going into broadcasting, media, journalism, TV production, that type of sports media, so the kind of intersection of all of those different things, and kind of figuring it out from here. And so I guess maybe where I've landed on this as a parent is, I think for me, it's all about, you can be successful in a lot of different things. So it's all about applying yourself. And what I tell my kids is it's all about making connections. So I think in this day and age where everyone goes to college, it was different when I grew up. Now everyone goes to college and everyone comes out with a 4-year degree. And a lot of debt and so on. And so to me, my son has like 5 or 6 internships he's doing. They're all like part-time. And so to me, that is the key, because you can be successful in sales, marketing, technology roles, TV production, broadcasting, whatever it might be. But for me as a parent and trying to instill in him is that you got to make connections. Because so many people hire from people that they know and that they trust and that they see are applying themselves and they're passionate about what they're doing, whatever that might be. And so that's a big key for me. I do think there's going to be automation displacing jobs of things that certain fields, like take radiology as an example, that the ability of a computer to actually analyze images from a radiology perspective is far better than humans, and actually finding outliers. Now, the person then is probably better at actually figuring out what's going on, but actually identifying anomalies, computers are exceptional at that. And so that's, look for those types of things that exist in a lot of different places. I think accounting is another area that you still need human analysis, but some of that can be automated. And so, apply yourself to understand what's going on and be a good communicator and storyteller. And those skills are hard to automate.
Before I let you go, I'm sure many listeners are interested in learning more about QuantHub. Where would you point them to?
Yeah, I think you can go to our website and you'll find plenty of information there. I'd love to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and so yeah, I would love to connect with people directly. We're an early stage company, so love hearing from individuals that are passionate about this area and what their approach is, and even just comparing notes. If it's that's fine too. I'd love to learn more about what people are doing.
Excellent. Well, Matt, I can tell you, not just me, but we're all rooting for QuantHub to succeed. It's an essential essential part of the new economy, and really enjoyed the conversation. Maybe you'll come back in the future and give us an update.
Yeah, I'd love to, Dan. I appreciate you guys having me.
You bet. Well, that's a wrap for this week. This is your host, Dan Turchin of AI and the Future of Work, signing off, but back next week with another fascinating guest.